January 21st, 1944. The night air over the Swiss Alps hung cold and still, sharpened by the kind of silence that precedes revelation. In a cramped radio monitoring station buried deep beneath the administrative wing of Stalag Luft III, a German Luftwaffe signals corporal named Ernst Becker sat hunched over his receiver, headphones pressed tight against his ears. The static crackled like distant fire. He had been listening for 3 hours, waiting for the telltale ping of Allied escape communications, the faint Morse rhythms that betrayed prisoner movements, the coded weather reports, the desperate pleas for extraction coordinates. But tonight, there was nothing, only the hiss of empty frequencies and the mechanical whir of the detection equipment cycling through bands. Becker removed his headphones, rubbed his temples, and turned to his superior officer. "Nichts," he said quietly. "Nothing." The officer's face darkened. Somewhere beyond the wire, beyond the watchtowers and the searchlights that swept the pine forests in mechanical arcs, an American prisoner had vanished into the European night, and the silence, the complete, inexplicable absence of signal, was more terrifying than any intercepted transmission could ever be. This was not supposed to happen, not like this. Not in 1944, when German signals intelligence had become a finely tuned instrument of control, when every Allied radio set was catalogued, when every frequency was monitored, when the Reich's technological superiority in electronic warfare was supposed to guarantee that no escaped prisoner could move undetected through occupied territory. The Germans had built an empire of interception. They had cracked codes, triangulated positions, hunted transmissions across thousands of kilometers. They had turned the invisible world of radio waves into a cage as secure as any barbed wire fence. And yet tonight, one man had slipped through that cage as though it did not exist. The question that haunted Ernst Becker, and would soon haunt the entire German military intelligence apparatus, was not simply where the American had gone. It was how he had disappeared so completely that not even the ether itself seemed to remember he existed. To understand the depth of German disbelief, one must first understand what they believed they had mastered. By 1944, the Wehrmacht's signals intelligence network was among the most sophisticated in the world. Radio detection finding units, known as Funkpeilung stations, dotted occupied Europe like an electronic spiderweb. They could detect a transmission from hundreds of kilometers away, triangulate its position within minutes, and dispatch security forces to the location before the operator had finished his message. The Gestapo and Abwehr maintained detailed logs of every known Allied radio set, every resistance cell's transmission schedule, every frequency used by escaped POWs attempting to contact British intelligence. German engineers had developed direction-finding equipment so sensitive it could isolate a signal amidst the noise of 100 competing broadcasts. They had mobile detection vans that prowled the streets of Paris, Brussels, Amsterdam, hunting for clandestine transmitters with the efficiency of bloodhounds. The system was supposed to be perfect, and for years it had been devastatingly effective. Hundreds of Allied agents and escaped prisoners had been captured because of radio intercepts. French resistance networks had been rolled up, their operators arrested mid-transmission. British SOE agents parachuted into occupied territory had been hunted down within days because German listening posts had caught the faint whisper of their emergency broadcasts. The Germans had learned to recognize individual radio operators by their fist, the unique rhythm and timing with which each person sent Morse code, as distinctive as a fingerprint. They had files on Allied operators the way police maintain files on criminals. Biographical notes, transmission patterns, frequency preferences, even psychological profiles predicting when an operator might break protocol under stress. The Reich's faith in its technological dominance was not arrogance. It was built on years of proven success. So when an American pilot named Robert Grimes vanished from Stalag Luft III on the night of January 21, 1944, and did not appear on a single German frequency for the next 72 hours, it was as though he had ceased to exist in the physical world entirely. The Germans had anticipated radio silence, of course. They knew escaped prisoners were trained to avoid transmission during the critical first days of an escape. Standard Allied protocols emphasized maintaining communications blackout until reaching a safe house or friendly territory. But what the Germans relied upon was not the prisoners' willingness to transmit, it was the inevitability of their eventual need to do so. Every escaped POW faced the same predicament, alone in hostile territory, unable to speak the language fluently, without papers, without currency, without contacts, hunted by military patrols and civilian informants alike. Sooner or later, desperation would force them to risk a transmission, a plea for extraction coordinates, a request for supply drops, a single burst of Morse asking for guidance. That moment of weakness was when the net closed. The Germans had built their entire recapture strategy around waiting for that moment. But Robert Grimes never gave them that moment. What the Luftwaffe monitoring stations did not know, what they could not have known, was that Grimes was not traveling alone through the invisible landscape of radio communication. He was traveling with something the Germans had not accounted for, something that rendered their entire detection apparatus obsolete, an American innovation so compact, so frequency agile, and so cleverly designed that it existed in the gaps between German listening capabilities like a ghost moving through walls. Grimes carried a British-designed, American-manufactured RS-6 Joan-Eleanor system, a handheld radio transceiver operating on frequencies above 250 MHz, far beyond the range of standard Wehrmacht detection equipment. While German listening posts scanned the traditional shortwave bands, Grimes communicated with Allied aircraft flying overhead using very high-frequency voice transmission, a technology the Germans had assumed was too bulky and power-intensive to be miniaturized for field use by an individual operative. They were catastrophically wrong. The Joan-Eleanor system represented a revolution in clandestine communications. Developed jointly by American and British intelligence services in 1943, it was designed specifically to defeat German signals intelligence. Traditional radio sets used by resistance networks and escaped prisoners transmitted on high-frequency shortwave bands, efficient for long-distance communication but easily detected and triangulated. The Joan-Eleanor system inverted the logic entirely. It used ultra-high-frequency voice transmission on wavelengths the Germans were not systematically monitoring, communicating not with distant ground stations, but with specially equipped aircraft orbiting at high altitude. The transmissions were brief, highly directional, and occurred on frequencies that changed with each communication session. The device itself was small enough to fit in a coat pocket, battery-powered, and required no external antenna that might betray its presence. To a German direction-finding team listening on conventional frequencies, an operative using Joan-Eleanor was invisible. But the technology alone was not the secret. The true American advantage lay in the operational philosophy behind it, a philosophy rooted in abundance, innovation, and a willingness to trust individuals with powerful tools. The German approach to signals intelligence was centralized, hierarchical, methodical. They built networks of listening posts staffed by trained technicians, analyzed intercepts through layers of command, cross-referenced intelligence reports through bureaucratic channels. It was effective but rigid, designed to control information as tightly as it controlled territory. The American approach, by contrast, was decentralized and adaptive. They equipped individual operatives with cutting-edge technology and trained them to improvise, to exploit gaps in enemy coverage, to communicate in bursts too brief and too high frequency to be reliably detected. Where the Germans built a fortress of interception, the Americans built a system of evasion, and in the winter of 1944, evasion won. Robert Grimes had been trained in the use of Joan-Eleanor during a covert program at a classified facility outside London before his bomber was shot down over occupied France. The training was intense and unorthodox. Unlike traditional radio operators who learned to send Morse code and maintain scheduled transmission windows, Joan-Eleanor operators were taught to think like fugitives. They learned to move constantly, to transmit only when aircraft were overhead, to encode messages verbally rather than tapping them out in slow, detectable Morse.
They practiced in urban environments and wilderness, simulating the chaos of escape under pursuit. They learned to recognize the sound of Allied aircraft engines by ear, to calculate altitude and approach vectors, to time transmissions to coincide with bomber streams returning from raids, so their signals would be lost in the electromagnetic noise of hundreds of aircraft. They were trained not as radio technicians, but as invisible communicators, human ghosts operating in the spaces between enemy awareness. When Grimes escaped from Stalag Luft III through a tunnel dug over 6 months by Allied prisoners, he carried the Joan-Eleanor unit concealed in a modified tobacco tin, its components disguised as personal effects. The night of his escape, he walked 18 kilometers through frozen forest, avoiding roads and villages, navigating by stars in the faint glow of distant searchlights. On the second night, he heard the distant drone of engines, American B-17s returning from a raid on Munich. He crouched in a clearing, extended the tiny telescoping antenna, and pressed the transmit button. Nightingale to Overwatch, position estimate 7 kilometers southwest of Sagan, require pickup coordinates and civilian contact. His voice was calm, steady. The transmission lasted 11 seconds. 300 meters overhead, a specially modified B-24 Liberator carrying signals intelligence officers and a Joan-Eleanor receiver picked up his transmission, logged his position, and relayed the information to London.
By the time Grimes released the transmit button, the communication was complete. To German listening posts scanning frequencies below 30 megahertz, nothing had happened. The night remained silent. This was the moment that shattered German confidence. In the days following Grimes's escape, Luftwaffe intelligence officers compiled reports attempting to explain the radio silence. They theorized he had been killed in the escape attempt and his body not yet discovered. They speculated he was traveling with false papers and avoiding communication entirely. They considered the possibility he had been captured by Soviet forces advancing from the east and was being held incommunicado. None of these explanations satisfied the operational evidence. Grimes had evaded patrols with uncanny precision, as though guided by real-time intelligence. He had avoided roadblocks set up specifically to intercept escapees heading toward neutral Switzerland. He had bypassed Wehrmacht checkpoints that should have been impossible to circumvent without prior knowledge of their locations. The Germans began to suspect, correctly, that Grimes was receiving external guidance. But how? Their listening posts had detected nothing. Their mobile direction-finding teams had swept the areas of his suspected movement and found no transmissions. It was as though he were being guided by invisible hands. The truth emerged only after the war, when Allied intelligence files were declassified and former operatives began to share their stories. Grimes had communicated with Allied aircraft 4 times during his 12-day journey across occupied Germany. Each transmission lasted less than 15 seconds. Each occurred when bomber formations were overhead, masking his signal in the electromagnetic clutter of hundreds of aircraft. Each time he received updated instructions, safe house locations, contact phrases, routes to avoid, schedules for resistance couriers. He moved through occupied Europe not as a desperate fugitive, but as a carefully guided asset, supported by an invisible network that operated on frequencies the Germans did not know existed. On February 2, 1944, he crossed into Switzerland near Basel, guided to within 50 meters of the border crossing point by his final Joan-Eleanor transmission. German border guards watched him walk past their checkpoint, assuming he was a local farmer. By the time they realized their error, he was on neutral soil, sipping hot coffee in a Swiss Red Cross station, already debriefing Allied intelligence officers. The German response to Grimes's escape and to similar incidents involving other Allied operatives using Joan-Eleanor systems revealed the psychological impact of technological surprise. Wehrmacht intelligence directives issued in early 1944 began to reference undetectable communication methods and frequency ranges beyond current monitoring capabilities. There was a note of alarm in these documents, a creeping awareness that the electronic battlefield had shifted beneath their feet. Engineers scrambled to extend the range of direction-finding equipment into VHF bands. New protocols were issued requiring mobile listening teams to scan higher frequencies.
Resources were diverted from other intelligence priorities to address the problem, but they were months behind. The Americans and British had been developing VHF covert communication systems since 1942, field testing them in 1943, and deploying them operationally by late 1943. By the time German intelligence recognized the threat in 1944, hundreds of Allied operatives were already equipped with Joan-Eleanor units or similar devices. The game had changed, and the Germans were still playing by old rules. What made the Joan-Eleanor system so effective was not merely its technical sophistication, but the broader infrastructure that supported it. American and British intelligence agencies had created an entire ecosystem around covert VHF communication. Specially modified aircraft flew regular orbits over occupied Europe, their routes coordinated with expected operative transmission windows. Signals intelligence officers aboard these aircraft were trained to recognize call signs, authenticate transmissions, and relay information instantaneously to ground controllers in England. Encrypted voice communication allowed for nuanced, real-time interaction. Operatives could ask questions, clarify instructions, report changing conditions, all within seconds. This was a world away from the slow, one-way communication of traditional spy networks, where a message sent by courier might take days to reach its destination and longer still to receive a response. The Americans had compressed the intelligence cycle into moments, creating a tempo of operations the Germans could not match. But there was something deeper at work, something that transcended technology. The Joan-Eleanor system embodied a particular kind of American thinking about warfare and human capability. It assumed that individuals, when properly equipped and trained, could outthink and outmaneuver larger, more rigid systems. It rejected the idea that control required visibility, that power required surveillance, that security required lockdown. Instead, it embraced invisibility, mobility, and trust in the initiative of individual operatives. This was not merely a tactical choice, it was a philosophical statement about the nature of freedom and constraint. The German Signals Intelligence Network was designed to see everything, to leave no space unmonitored, to ensure that control was total and absolute. The American approach was designed to exploit the impossibility of total control, to find the gaps, to operate in the margins, to turn the enemy's own rigidity into a vulnerability. In this sense, the Joan-Eleanor system was not just a radio, it was an expression of competing ideologies materialized in circuits and frequencies. Ernst Becker, the signals corporal who sat in that underground listening post on the night of January 21, 1944, never learned what had happened.
He continued his duties, scanning frequencies, logging intercepts, contributing to the vast machinery of German surveillance. After the war, he returned to his hometown in Bavaria, worked as a postal clerk, and rarely spoke of his wartime service. But in a brief memoir written late in life, he recounted that night and others like it, the nights when prisoners vanished without a trace, when frequencies went silent, when the invisible world seemed to mock the Reich's claims of omniscience. He wrote of a growing sense, shared among signals intelligence personnel, that the Allies possessed capabilities beyond German understanding. We listened, he wrote, but we were deaf to what we could not imagine. It is a haunting admission, a recognition that technological superiority is always temporary, that the advantage lies not with those who build the most elaborate systems of control, but with those who invent ways to move beyond control entirely. The story of Robert Grimes and the Joan-Eleanor system is not a story of a single escape or a single device. It is a story about the limits of surveillance, the ingenuity born of necessity, and the ways in which abundance of resources, of ideas, of willingness to experiment can create asymmetric advantages that no amount of rigid planning can overcome. The Germans had built an empire of interception, a fortress of signals intelligence that should have made escape impossible, but they had built it to monitor a known threat, to detect known frequencies, to intercept known methods. When the Americans introduced a method that existed outside those parameters, the entire fortress became irrelevant.
The cage remained intact, but the prisoner was already gone, moving through dimensions the cage was not designed to contain. In the years following the war, military historians and intelligence analysts studied the Joan-Eleanor system and similar innovations as case studies in technological disruption. They noted that the device's impact far exceeded its tactical use. Fewer than 100 Joan-Eleanor units were deployed during the war, and they were used in only a limited number of operations. But the psychological impact on German intelligence was profound. The knowledge that Allied operatives could communicate undetected created a climate of uncertainty. If one technology had been overlooked, what else had been missed? What other invisible capabilities did the Allies possess? This uncertainty forced the Germans to spread their resources more thinly, to invest in countermeasures against threats that might or might not exist, to second-guess their own intelligence assessments. The Joan-Eleanor system won not by enabling mass operations, but by undermining confidence in the enemy's ability to see and control the battlefield. It was a weapon of doubt, and doubt is corrosive. There is a symbolic elegance to the image of Robert Grimes standing in a frozen clearing, whispering into a device small enough to conceal in his palm, while overhead an aircraft listened in the darkness. It captures something essential about the American way of war, the faith in individual agency, the investment in technological innovation, the willingness to trust people with powerful tools and expect them to improvise. The German approach to control was panoptical: see everything, monitor everything, leave no space unwatched. The American approach was asymmetric: find the blind spot, exploit the gap, operate where the enemy is not looking. One approach seeks total visibility, the other seeks total evasion. And in the contest between visibility and evasion, evasion holds a permanent advantage, because no system of surveillance can ever be truly total. There will always be a gap, a frequency unmonitored, a wavelength overlooked. The Joan-Eleanor system did not defeat German signals intelligence by overpowering it. It defeated it by existing in the space the Germans never thought to guard.
The legacy of this innovation extends far beyond World War II. Modern covert communication systems, from satellite phones to encrypted digital messaging, trace their conceptual lineage back to devices like Joan-Eleanor. The principle remains the same: operate on frequencies or through methods the adversary is not equipped to monitor, compress communication into bursts too brief to detect, decentralize control so that no single point of failure can compromise the network. Contemporary military doctrine speaks of operating inside the enemy's decision cycle, of achieving dominance not through brute force, but through superior information flow and faster adaptation. These are the same principles embodied in that handheld radio Grimes carried through occupied Germany in 1944. The technology has evolved, but the underlying logic, the logic of evasion, of exploiting gaps, of trusting individuals with powerful tools, remains unchanged. It is a logic born of abundance, of the confidence that resources can be invested in experimentation, that failures can be tolerated in pursuit of breakthroughs, that the next innovation is always possible because creativity is inexhaustible. In the end, the silence that so unnerved Ernst Becker and the German signals intelligence apparatus was not silence at all. It was a different kind of communication, occurring on wavelengths they could not hear, in a dimension of the electromagnetic spectrum they had not imagined could be weaponized. It was the sound of the future, arriving before the present was ready to perceive it. And it was the sound of freedom, not as an abstraction, not as a propaganda slogan, but as a practical capability, the ability to move undetected, to speak unheard by those who would constrain you, to slip through the bars of the cage and into the open night. That is what Robert Grimes carried in his coat pocket as he walked through frozen forests toward the Swiss border. Not just a radio, but a piece of a larger truth, that no system of control, however sophisticated, can ever fully contain the human capacity for innovation, adaptation, and escape.
The Germans built their fortress of signals intelligence brick by brick, frequency by frequency, believing they had made the invisible visible, the silent loud. But they had only illuminated the wavelengths they knew to look for. Beyond those wavelengths, in the darkness they had not imagined, other voices were speaking, and those voices were free.